Hi, and welcome to the Honest Work Designs channel. My name is Haley Krause. I'm the maker and creator for HWD, and today we have part 2 of 3 of our tiny shop build. Today we're going to be putting together the second of 2 mobile and modular workbenches. If you missed part 1, I recommend that you go back and check it out because the workbench that we're putting together today actually interlocks with the workbench that we put together in part 1 to give the table saw and router a longer feed table. So with that, if you see something or have a question, insights, ideas, concerns, feel free to leave those in the comments, and I hope you enjoy. As I drill umpteen pocket holes to set up for our second bench build, let's recap, kind of refresh exactly why we're putting the second one together. So, as I stated, the primary reason is to give our table saw and router table, which we'll put together in part 3, kind of a longer feed table. The second reason is to also give us a general workspace when it's not attached to the primary table. It'll be a nice space just to kind of do general work. And then thirdly, I'm going to put a shelf kind of lower towards the floor, so it gives us kind of a nice large shelf, and that will be our future home for the air compressor and finishing gun and framing gun and all sorts of knickknacks. Since I wasn't able to reuse the legs from my makeshift table like I could for the table saw bench build in episode 1, I had to go ahead and cut down a long 4x4 into 32-inch legs. Once those were all cut, I went ahead and measured about 6 inches above the bottom of a leg. This mark would indicate where the top of the bottom 2x4 would sit and be secured. After that, it was time to drill, baby, drill. After watching the first couple clips while editing this episode, I also thought it brought to light a very important reason for the second bench. I hate working on the floor, so having some workspace at a more comfortable and appropriate height was definitely a plus. In the tiny shop, no 2 joints can be secured with the build sitting in the exact same position. So that meant there was a lot of flipping and finagling and changing around locales so I could A, reach the joint, and B, that the weight of the cart wouldn't, start to lever on any one joint that wasn't fully in place yet. Once the bottom frame was all put together, I used clamps at the top of the legs on the shorter ends to kind of squeeze the legs together. Because these boards are just mill cut, they're not squared or anything, they bowed just a little bit, so the clamps kind of gave me the leverage to put the same size 2x4 crossbeam in there to get a nice square and hopefully level table. Because the cross beams didn't require any specialty cuts like they did in part 1, it was a quick measure, cut, and secure. Because I cut the legs at a specific 32 inches, the 2x4 crossbeams simply had to sit flush with the top of the legs so that the tabletop would interlock nicely with the first cart. I used nice long screws with a sort of flatter head on them to secure the wheels to the cart. With a lot of debris and whatnot on the floors, there's plenty of opportunity for these wheels to lever and kind of wobble on the legs, so I wanted to make sure that I was never going to lose a wheel off the bench. The wheels got the workbench up to about 36 inches. I think that's a pretty normal height for workbenches, but it also depends on the maker and woodworker, so I guess the beauty of creating your own shop is that you get to make the rules. After double checking that the bench was level, it was time to fasten the clasps that would lock bench 1 and bench 2 together. Using my drill and my favorite mark your spot tool, I clamped the legs together, aligned the clasps, marked the drill spot, and secured the clasps with the hardware they came with. After making it so the two benches could interlock with one another, it was time to cut the tabletop of bench number 2. In order for bench number 2 to serve its purpose as a feed table, the tabletop couldn't just be the length and width of the bench frame. Rather, it had to be a little bit shorter and a little bit wider. You'll see what I mean. Word to the wise, even if you've lost your proper eye protection, don't cut particle board alone. Then I squared the backside of the tabletop to the frame of the bench and secured it with clamps. I did this so I could kind of test fit how the two tables interlocked with one another prior to doing the final secure with L brackets. Once determined to be level with bench number 1, it was time to secure the tabletop to the frame. While no real measurements were taken, I did attempt to evenly space the L brackets so we had a nice, snug, secure fit from the tabletop to the frame. As mentioned in part 1, I finished off the tabletops with 3/4 inch plywood. A, for aesthetics, I thought it would look cool to have a little variation, and B, simply because it was an easier shape to cut. To get the right fit, I did a quick refresher measure of the gaps in the table and then set the table saw fence to match. when watching yourself, shortcuts that seemed insignificant at the time have a funny way of becoming blatantly obvious. I am not proud of the safety shortcomings I have in using the ripsaw simply because I couldn't easily find my push that got lost somewhere out in the back patio. So as a hypocrite, I say safety should always come first. Each finishing piece of plywood was fitted to measure and cut. Because of some squaring issues between cart 1 and cart 2, simply because I wasn't using squared boards, I used the belt sander to clear out some excess plywood and clean up that final edge. After the pieces were secured and some set with wood glue, we had our second tiny shop, mobile, and modular bench. So as a quick recap of part 2 of our tiny shop build, we put together our second workbench that's mobile and modular and interlocks with our first workbench. We did that so we had that nice long feed table from our table saw and soon to be router table. In part 3, we're going to go ahead and put together that router table, cut in some table slots so that these two benches really interplay with each other, and then it's just final finishes. So paint, polyurethane, small tool organization, the whole nine. So I hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in seeing the final steps to the tiny shop build, please feel free to subscribe. If you have questions, concerns, comments, ideas, please feel free to leave those in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you guys at part 3.